Close your eyes for a moment and try to feel time passing. Don't look at the clock. Don't count the seconds. Just feel. What do you notice? Maybe the rhythm of your breathing, the gentle pulse of your heartbeat, the sensation of being here, in this moment, in this now. But what is this now? Where is it? If you try to grasp it, it's already gone. If you try to define it, it slips through your fingers like water. The present seems to have zero duration, an infinitely thin point between a past that no longer exists and a future that hasn't arrived yet. So where are you, really? There's a possibility that's unsettling, wonderful, and strangely comforting that some of the brightest physicists of our time have begun to seriously consider. Time might not be real, not in the sense that you're imagining things, or that the clock on your wall is an optical illusion, but in the deepest, most fundamental sense possible. Time might not be a basic feature of reality. It might be something that emerges, something we construct, a story we tell ourselves to make sense of a universe that, at its deepest level, simply exists in an eternal frozen present. Think about how that sounds. A universe without time, no past, no future, no flow of moments. Just a vast block of existence where everything that ever happened and everything that will happen is simply there, eternally present, like pages in a book that's never read in sequence but exists complete. All at once. You, me, all the stars, all the galaxies, every thought you've ever had and every one you'll ever have, all frozen in a single eternal moment of existence. And the feeling that time flows, that you're moving from past to future, would be just that. A feeling, a perspective, a particular way of experiencing this timeless structure. This isn't a new idea, but it's not ancient either. It lives in a strange space between millennia-old philosophy and cutting-edge physics, between the meditations of sages on the nature of reality and the most advanced equations we have to describe the universe. And in recent years, it's moved from the margins of scientific thought toward the center, carried by discoveries in quantum mechanics, relativity, and cosmology that simply don't make sense if we assume time is what we think it is. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, I want to take you on a journey through this idea. I won't promise definitive answers, because we don't have them. But I'll show you why some of the greatest minds in physics have begun to suspect that the most obvious thing about our experience, the fact that time flows, might be the greatest illusion nature ever created. And paradoxically, understanding this might be one of the most relaxing things you can do before falling asleep. Because if time doesn't flow the way we think it does, then maybe there's no rush. Maybe everything is already where it needs to be. Maybe you can simply relax into the eternal present and let the sense of urgency dissolve like morning mist. Time is one of the first things we learn to measure as children. Seconds, minutes, hours, yesterday, today, tomorrow, past, present, future. The structure of time seems as solid as the walls around you, as reliable as the ground beneath your feet. You wake up in the morning and the day begins. The sun moves across the sky, night arrives, you sleep, the pattern repeats. Time flows in one direction, always forward, never backward, carrying you along like an invisible river that never stops. But physicists have discovered something strange. When you look at the fundamental equations that describe how the universe works, the laws of quantum mechanics, Einstein's equations of general relativity, even the basic rules of particle physics, there's nothing in those equations that says time has to flow. There's no built-in arrow pointing from past to future. The equations work equally well going forward or backward in time. It's as if the universe, at its deepest level, makes no distinction between past and future. This creates a profound mystery. If the fundamental laws of physics don't distinguish between past and future, why do we? Why do we feel time flowing in only one direction? Why do we remember the past, but not the future? Why do we see glasses breaking, but never see the pieces spontaneously leap back together to form the whole glass? Where does this temporal asymmetry come from if it's not written into the basic laws of the universe? And there's another problem, even deeper. In quantum physics, when you try to combine the rules of the quantum world with Einstein's rules of gravity, something very strange happens. Time disappears from the equations. Literally. There's an equation called the Wheeler-DeWitt equation that describes the quantum state of the entire universe, and in that equation, time doesn't appear anywhere. It's as if, when you look at the universe as a whole on a quantum level, time simply doesn't exist. The entire universe is described by a single, timeless state. This suggests something radical. Maybe time isn't a fundamental feature of reality, but something that emerges only when you look at parts of the universe, not at the whole. Like temperature. It doesn't make sense to talk about the temperature of a single atom, but when you have trillions of atoms together, temperature emerges as a useful property. Maybe time is like that. Maybe it emerges only when you're inside the universe, looking from a limited perspective, and disappears when you try to look at the complete picture. So as you settle in tonight, let's explore this possibility together. Let's see why some physicists believe time might not exist, what that really means, and strangely, why this might be one of the most peaceful and comforting ideas you can contemplate as you drift off to sleep. Before we go deeper into this journey through time that might not exist, I want to say I'm really glad you're here with me tonight. If you're finding this exploration comforting, if you're enjoying this different way of thinking about reality as you relax, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this with anyone who might need help sleeping. These nighttime journeys through the mysteries of the cosmos are created especially for moments like this, when you want your mind engaged in something deep and beautiful while your body relaxes into sleep. And if you ever find yourself struggling with insomnia or just need something gentle to help you drift off, come back to this. Let it become a familiar companion in those quiet hours when sleep feels far away. That's what it's here for, to guide you softly into rest, night after night, whenever you need it. There's one moment that's special to you above all others. That moment is now. Not the now from 5 minutes ago, not tomorrow's now, but this now, this present moment in which you're reading or hearing these words. This now feels absolutely real. Absolutely solid, absolutely unique. It's the only moment in which you truly exist. The past is already gone, transformed into memory. The future hasn't arrived yet, just a fog of possibilities. But now is real. Now is where you live. Here's the problem. Physics has no place for your now. Absolutely no place. In Einstein's equations, there's nothing that corresponds to the present moment. Einstein's space-time is a four-dimensional block where past, present, and future exist equally. It's called the block universe. Imagine a solid block of granite where one dimension is time. In that block, all moments in history exist simultaneously. Your childhood exists there. Your old age exists there. This moment exists there. Everything is equally real, equally present, just at different temporal locations. But that doesn't capture what you feel. You feel there's a special moment that is now, that's moving through time like a spotlight moving across a dark landscape, illuminating only one piece at a time. You feel that the past doesn't exist anymore. It's no longer real. And that the future isn't yet real. Only now is real. But where does this feeling come from if physics recognizes nothing special about the present moment? Einstein was deeply troubled by this. When his close friend Michel Besso died, Einstein wrote a letter to his family saying, "For us who believe in physics, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion." Einstein was saying that the flow of time, the feeling that the present is real and special, is an illusion created by our limited perspective. From the universe's point of view as a whole, all moments simply exist. Think about that for a moment as you breathe gently. If Einstein was right, then all the moments of your life exist right now, simultaneously, at different locations in space-time. The child you were is still there, living that moment, as real as you are now. The elderly person you'll be is already there, living that future moment. All these yous exist simultaneously in the block universe. The feeling that you're moving from past to future is just a perspective, a particular way of experiencing this timeless block of existence. But this raises an even deeper question. If all moments exist equally, why do we have memories of the past, but not the future? Why does cause always come before effect? Why do we feel time flowing in one direction if the fundamental laws of physics work equally well in both directions? This is where things get really interesting. The answer has to do with something called entropy. Entropy is a measure of disorder, of randomness, of how many different ways you can arrange the parts of a system without changing its overall appearance. A tidy room has low entropy. There are only a few ways to organize it that look tidy. A messy room has high entropy. There are millions of ways to scatter things randomly. And there's a law of physics that says entropy always increases with time. Things get more disordered, more random, more spread out. This is the only law of physics that distinguishes between past and future. But here's the strange thing. The law that entropy increases isn't really a fundamental law. It's a statistical law. It's true on average, true for large systems, but it's not an absolute, inevitable rule written into the fabric of reality. And more importantly, the law of increasing entropy only works if you assume the universe began in a low entropy state, highly ordered. If you don't assume that, then entropy could easily decrease instead of increase, or fluctuate randomly, and there would be no preferred direction of time. So the arrow of time, the feeling that time flows from past to future, seems to depend on a specific initial condition. The universe started in a highly ordered state at the Big Bang. But why? Why would the universe start in a low entropy state? We don't have a good answer for that. It's just an assumption we make because we observe that entropy is increasing now. But if time really flows, if the past is truly in the past and the future in the future, we should be able to explain why the universe started in a particular way without just assuming it because it's what we see. This suggests that maybe we're thinking about all this the wrong way. Maybe there isn't really an arrow of time at a fundamental level. Maybe the feeling that time flows is something that emerges from our limited perspective, from the way our brains organize memories, from the way we perceive changes. Maybe at a fundamental level, the universe simply is a vast block of existence with no past, no future, no flow. And we, living inside it, experience a particular slice of that block and interpret it as time flowing. If this is true, then the present moment, this now so special to you, isn't really more real than any other moment. It's just where you're located in the block universe. And the feeling that time is passing, that you're aging, that things are changing, is just your subjective perspective as you experience different slices of the block in sequence. From outside, from the universe's point of view as a whole, nothing is really changing. Everything simply exists. This might sound depressing at first, but as you relax and let this idea settle, there might be something deeply peaceful about it. If there's not really a flow of time, then there's no rush, no pressure to reach the future or leave the past behind. Everything is already where it needs to be. You're already where you need to be. Just experience this moment, this now, because in a very real sense, it's the only moment that exists. Not because past and future aren't real, but because they're just as real as this moment and all exist simultaneously in the vast eternal present of the universe. If you really want to understand why time might not exist, you need to understand something Einstein discovered. Time is not universal. There's no single cosmic clock ticking away the seconds for the entire universe. Instead, every point in space has its own time, its own rhythm, and these different rhythms can differ dramatically depending on where you are and how fast you're moving. Time, Einstein found, is local, it's personal, it's malleable. Imagine two absolutely identical atomic clocks, perfectly synchronized. Now take one of those clocks and put it on an airplane. Fly the airplane around the world while the other clock stays on the ground. When you bring the traveling clock back and compare the two, they won't be synchronized anymore. The clock that flew will have measured slightly less time than the clock that stayed still. Time literally passed more slowly for the moving clock. This isn't a defect in the clocks, it's time itself that passed more slowly. This experiment has actually been done, and the results confirmed Einstein's prediction perfectly. Or consider gravity. Time passes more slowly near massive objects. If you were standing near the event horizon of a black hole, that point of no return beyond which not even light can escape, time for you would pass drastically more slowly than for someone floating safely far away in deep space. If you could somehow survive near the event horizon for 1 hour, you can't, but let's imagine. When you return to distant space, years, decades, maybe even centuries might have passed for the rest of the universe. Your clock, your heart, your very cells would have aged 1 hour. The universe would have aged far more. This creates a profound philosophical problem. If time passes at different rates for different people, depending on where they are and how fast they're moving, then what is the real time? What is the real now? If you're near a black hole and I'm far from it, and time is passing more slowly for you than for me, then when is now? Is it your now or my now? And if they're different, then how can there be a universal present, a single moment that is now for the entire universe? Einstein's answer was radical. There is no universal now. There's no present moment that's the same for everyone everywhere. Instead, simultaneity, the idea that two events happen at the same time, is relative. It depends on your state of motion. Events that are simultaneous for you might not be simultaneous for someone else moving relative to you. The present, in other words, is a matter of perspective. Let that settle in as you breathe deeply. The present is not an objective feature of the universe. It's observer-dependent. It's relative. Two different observers can disagree about which events are happening now, and both would be correct from their perspectives. There's no universal court of appeal, no privileged perspective from which you can declare what the real now is. Every perspective is equally valid. This has strange implications. Imagine there's an alien in a galaxy 1 billion light years away. If that alien is stationary relative to you, then you'd both roughly agree on which events are happening now, here on Earth. But if that alien starts moving toward Earth at high speed, then the alien's present would shift. Suddenly, the alien's now could be years into your future. They might consider events that haven't happened yet for you as part of their present. And if the alien started moving away from you, their now could be years into your past. This means that simply by changing your state of motion, you can change which events at distant locations you consider part of the present moment. The present isn't fixed. It stretches and contracts and shifts depending on how you're moving. And if the present is so malleable, so perspective dependent, then in what sense can it be considered real? In what sense is now a fundamental feature of reality if different observers can't even agree on when it is? This brings us back to the block universe. If there's no universal present, if simultaneity is relative, then maybe it makes more sense to think of space-time as a four-dimensional block where all moments exist equally. There's no privileged now moving through time because different observers would have completely different nows. Instead, there's just the complete block, and each observer experiences a particular path through it, a particular sequence of slices, and interprets that as the flow of time. But there's something even stranger. In general relativity, Einstein's theory of gravity, Time isn't just relative, it's dynamic. Space and time form a unified four-dimensional structure called space-time, and this structure can bend, stretch, ripple, and even break. Matter and energy curve space-time, and that curvature is what we experience as gravity. But if space-time is bending and stretching, then time itself is bending and stretching. Time isn't a fixed stage on which events happen. It's part of the fabric of the universe, as dynamic and changeable as anything else. And when you try to combine general relativity with quantum mechanics, when you try to understand how space-time behaves at extremely small scales, or in situations of extreme gravity like inside a black hole, or at the moment of the Big Bang, you encounter a deep problem. Time ceases to make sense. The equations that try to describe quantum gravity, like the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, have no time in them. Time simply disappears from the equations. It's as if, at a fundamental level, time isn't part of the basic furniture of the universe. So as you're lying here, consider this. The time you experience so vividly, the constant flow of moments, might be an emergent property, something that arises only at certain scales or certain perspectives. Not a fundamental feature of reality, but something that appears when you look in a certain way, like the apparent smoothness of a rock when you view it from far away, even though it's rough and jagged when you get close. Maybe time is smooth and flowing from our perspective, but rough, discontinuous, or even non-existent when you look closely enough or from a broad enough perspective. And maybe that's why it's so difficult to reconcile relativity with quantum mechanics. Maybe we're trying to describe a timeless universe using a language that assumes time is fundamental. Maybe we need a new way of thinking, a new conceptual framework that doesn't put time at its center. A physics without time, a reality without flow, just existence, pure and simple, and we, small perspectives within it, experiencing it sequentially and calling that experience time. There's a puzzle at the heart of modern physics that few outside the scientific community know about, but which might be the key to understanding whether time is real. It's called the problem of time in quantum gravity, and it's so deep, so disturbing, that some physicists have devoted entire careers trying to solve it, while others have simply decided to live with it and hope someone smarter figures out the answer. The problem arises when you try to create a quantum theory of gravity. Quantum mechanics brilliantly describes how particles and fields behave. General relativity brilliantly describes how space and time curve in response to matter and energy. But when you try to combine them, when you try to describe what happens to the structure of space-time itself at a quantum level, you run into the Wheeler-DeWitt equation. And in that equation, something shocking happens. There's no time variable. Time doesn't appear anywhere. This doesn't just mean that time is relative or that it flows at different rates. It means that when you write the equation describing the quantum state of the entire universe, there's no time parameter at all. The equation describes a static, timeless, frozen state. The entire universe, from a quantum point of view, exists in a single timeless state that doesn't evolve because there's no time with respect to which it could evolve. This is profoundly strange. All of quantum mechanics as we normally use it depends on time evolution. You have a system in one state, time passes, and the system evolves to a new state, according to Schrödinger's equation. But Schrödinger's equation assumes there's an external time with respect to which the system evolves. When you try to apply quantum mechanics to the universe as a whole, there's no external time. Time is inside the universe, not outside it. So with respect to what would the universe evolve? There's nothing outside the universe, no external cosmic clock ticking away the moments. The universe simply exists in a timeless state. Let your mind rest on that image for a moment. A universe that doesn't evolve, a universe that simply is. All possible configurations of all particles, all fields, all structures that ever existed or will exist, all packed into a single timeless quantum state. There's no before or after at a fundamental level, just a vast quantum now that contains all possibilities simultaneously. But wait, you might be thinking, I clearly see things changing. I see time passing. How can the universe be timeless if I experience time? That's the million-dollar question, and there are several possible answers being explored by physicists. One of them is that time emerges when you look at parts of the universe instead of looking at the whole. It's a concept called thermal time, and it works like this. Imagine you have a box full of gas. At a fundamental level, gas molecules are just bouncing around, following reversible laws of motion. There's no arrow of time in the laws governing individual molecules. But when you have trillions of molecules and you're not tracking each one individually, when you're only measuring large-scale properties like temperature and pressure, then an arrow of time emerges. Entropy increases. Heat flows from hot to cold. Irreversibility emerges from fundamentally reversible laws. Maybe time works the same way. Maybe when you look at the universe as a whole, it's timeless, described by a single static quantum state. But when you're an observer inside the universe, looking at only a small part of it, ignoring the vast majority of information about the complete state, then time emerges. The changes you see, the flow you experience, arise from your limited perspective, from the fact that you're correlated with only a very small subset of the total quantum state of the universe. Your brain, in particular, is an information processing system that records memories of earlier states. Those memories create a temporal asymmetry. You remember the past, but not the future. And that asymmetry creates the sensation that time is flowing, that you're moving from past to future. But from a universal perspective, from outside the system, there's no flow. There's just the vast, timeless quantum state that contains all possible configurations, including all versions of you with different memories, all existing simultaneously in the quantum superstate of the cosmos. This is what Carlo Rovelli, one of the leading thinkers on this problem, calls physics without time. Rovelli argues that time is not a fundamental feature of reality, but an emergent property that arises when you look at the universe from a particular perspective with limited information. He compares it to the way hot and cold are concepts that make sense only for large systems, but have no meaning for individual particles. An individual molecule isn't hot or cold. It just has a certain kinetic energy. Hot and cold emerge when you have many molecules and a macroscopic perspective. Maybe time is like that. Maybe it emerges only when you have a macroscopic perspective with memories and records of earlier states. Another possibility, explored by physicist Julian Barbour, is even more radical. Barbour suggests that each moment is complete in itself. Each instant is an independent now that doesn't need earlier or later moments to make sense. The universe, says Barbour, is a vast collection of possible nows, each complete, each self-sufficient. What we experience as time is a sequence through these nows, but the sequence itself isn't fundamental. The nows exist independently, and the feeling that they follow one another is an illusion created by the way memories are embedded in each now. Think of it this way. Every moment of experience you have contains memories of earlier moments. When you remember having breakfast this morning, that memory exists now, in this moment. It doesn't exist in the past. The past is gone. The memory exists now. So what do we really know? We know that this current moment contains records and traces that we interpret as memories of the past. But maybe those records don't point to moments that actually happened in sequence. Maybe each moment with its embedded memories simply exists, and the narrative of causality and temporal flow is something we construct from the patterns of memories and records we find in each moment. If this is correct, then the universe is less like a movie unfolding and more like an art gallery containing paintings of every possible moment. Each now is like a complete painting in itself. Some paintings contain representations of earlier paintings. Those are the memories. And when you, as consciousness, experience these nows in sequence, you interpret the representations as evidence that you came from earlier moments and are going toward later moments. But in reality, each moment simply exists, independent of the others. As you rest here, breathing gently, consider this. This exact moment you're experiencing right now is complete in itself. It doesn't need earlier moments to exist. The memories you have of earlier moments are part of this moment, records embedded in the current configuration of your brain. And if all your memories were suddenly different, if you suddenly remembered a completely different life, there would be no way to prove that this new history wasn't the real past. The past, in a very real sense, is determined by the present, by the memories and records that exist now. This doesn't mean the past didn't happen. It means happened might not mean what we think it means. Maybe all moments simply exist, and the relationships between them, the causal connections we see, the flow we feel, are patterns that emerge when a consciousness like yours experiences a particular sequence of those moments. Time is the story you tell about how those moments relate, but the story might not be written into the fundamental structure of reality. And if this is true, then you can relax. There isn't truly a past weighing on you or a future rushing toward you. There's only this moment, this now, complete and whole in itself. And as you fall into sleep, you can let go of the feeling of being caught in a temporal river. You can simply exist, here, in this eternal present that's the only place you've ever been and the only place you'll ever be. There's a question that inevitably arises when you start seriously considering that time might not exist. What about consciousness? Because one of the most fundamental things about conscious experience is the sensation of being in a moment that moves, of experiencing a flow of moments, of being alive in a present that constantly transforms into past while the future becomes present. The phenomenology of consciousness, the way it feels from the inside, seems deeply temporal. How can consciousness work if time isn't real? This is one of the biggest mysteries at the intersection of physics, philosophy, and neuroscience. But maybe, paradoxically, understanding that time might not exist helps us understand consciousness better, not worse. Because when you really pay attention to how conscious experience works, you realize it's much stranger than we normally assume. First, consider what we call the present moment of consciousness. How long does it last? When you experience a sound, say a musical note, you don't experience separate snapshots of sound at successive moments. You experience the note as extended in time, as having duration. Neuroscientists estimate that the window of the present for consciousness, the time interval we experience as now, lasts about 2 to 3 seconds. Anything shorter than a few milliseconds we can't distinguish as separate in time. Anything longer than a few seconds we don't hold as immediate present, but relegate to short-term memory. So, your conscious present isn't really an instant. It's a sliding window of approximately 3 seconds where events within that window are experienced as simultaneous or as part of a continuously flowing present. But here's something strange. That window is constructed by your brain. It's a cognitive construction. Your brain takes signals arriving at slightly different times and stitches them into a coherent experience of now. It's constantly editing, revising, creating a coherent narrative of the present from information arriving asynchronously. There are famous experiments demonstrating this. If you see a flash of light and hear a sound at the same time, but they're separated in space, the light coming from one place, the sound from another, your brain will slightly adjust the perceived timing of each to make them seem synchronized. If you're repeatedly exposed to the light coming before the sound, your brain adapts, and eventually you'll start perceiving a sound that comes before the light as coming after. Your brain is constantly recalibrating its sense of simultaneity based on the statistical regularities of what usually happens. More dramatically, there's the phenomenon known as post-diction in consciousness. Sometimes you make a decision, moving your hand, for example, and only after making the decision, your brain constructs a conscious experience of having decided to move it a moment earlier. In other words, consciousness is constantly revising the recent past, creating a coherent narrative that makes it seem like you consciously decided to do something when, in fact, the decision was already made by unconscious processes, and the conscious experience was added retroactively. This should be unsettling. It means your sense of being in control, of being the author of your actions in the moment you make them, is partly a story constructed after the fact. Your brain is constantly building a coherent temporal narrative, and part of that construction involves editing the timing of events to make the experience smooth and meaningful. The present you experience isn't the raw present of physical reality. It's a carefully crafted construction designed to make sense of disjointed sensory information. So when you experience the flow of time, what are you really experiencing? You're experiencing the narrative your brain is constructing, a story about how moments connect and flow into each other. But that story isn't the underlying reality. It's an interpretation, a model, a useful fiction your brain creates to help you navigate and predict the world. Think of watching a movie. The movie is really just a series of static images shown rapidly in succession. There's no actual motion on the screen. There's just a series of still photographs. But your brain, seeing those images in rapid sequence, constructs an experience of smooth, continuous motion. The motion you see isn't on the screen. It's in your head. It's in the way your brain interprets the sequence of static images. Maybe time works the same way. Maybe the fundamental reality is like the individual frames of a film, a series of states, or in Barbour's more radical formulation, a collection of independent nows. And your brain, experiencing those states or nows in sequence, constructs an experience of smooth, continuous temporal flow. The flow isn't out there in reality. It's in your head. It's the way your brain interprets the sequence of states it encounters. This would also explain why time seems to flow at different rates in different circumstances. When you're bored, time drags. When you're deeply engaged, time flies. When you're in an emergency, time seems to slow down and you experience events in slow motion. These changes in the perceived rate of temporal flow don't make sense if time is an objective feature of reality flowing at a fixed rate. But they make perfect sense if temporal flow is a construction of your brain, because then the rate of flow can vary depending on how your brain is processing information at the moment. There's also the question of attention. When you pay attention to something, time seems to last longer. An attended event seems to have longer duration than an unattended event of the same physical length. Why? Because attention makes your brain process more information about the event, create richer representations of it in memory, and when you remember, you judge duration based on how rich the memories are. More information, longer perceived duration. Again, the time you experience isn't the objective time of physics, but a construction based on how your brain is processing and storing information. All of this suggests that the feeling that time flows, so central to conscious experience, might be an illusion. Not in the sense that you don't experience it, but in the sense that it doesn't correspond to a feature of external reality. It's a feature of how your brain models reality, not of reality itself. And if you think about it, this is liberating. Because it means time isn't pushing you, isn't dragging you inexorably forward. The flow you feel is your own construction, and as such, you have more control over it than you think. Meditative practices that focus on experiencing the present moment, that dissolve the usual temporal narrative and let you rest in the pure now, aren't just changing your perception, they might be bringing you closer to how reality actually is at a fundamental level. An eternal present, without flow, just pure existence. So as you're lying here on the edge of sleep, consciousness beginning to dissolve into the boundaries of dream, you might notice how the sense of time starts to disintegrate. In sleep, especially in deep, dreamless sleep, there's no sense of time passing. You lose consciousness, and then what feels like a moment later, but might have been hours, you return. Where was time during that interval? It wasn't flowing in your experience. It simply wasn't there. And yet you survived. You continue. The absence of experience time didn't erase you. Maybe that's a clue. Maybe sleep is a daily return to the fundamental, timeless state of the universe. Maybe when you sink into deep sleep, you're letting go of the construction of time your brain normally maintains, and you're resting in the timeless reality that's always there, underneath the narrative, underneath the flow, underneath the story you tell about being in a moment moving through time. Just existence, just being. No past, no future, no pressure, no rush, just the eternal now of the cosmos. If time really doesn't exist, or if it exists only as an emergent property, a perspective, a construction of consciousness, then what does that mean for how you should live? It's a fair question, because you can intellectually agree with all the arguments, follow all the physics and philosophy, and still wake up in the morning feeling like you have to hurry, that time is passing, that there's a future to reach and a past left behind. The experience of time is stubbornly persistent, even when you understand it might be illusory. But maybe understanding the illusory nature of time can subtly change how you relate to it. Not erasing the experience, but changing its texture, loosening its grip on you. Because if you truly internalize that the flow of time is something your brain constructs, not an objective feature of reality, then you can begin to relate to that flow differently, less like a prisoner being dragged by a current, and more like a conscious observer of a process that's partially under your control. There's a tradition in philosophy and spiritual practice, found in various forms across different cultures, of trying to live completely in the present. Be here now, as the saying goes. But what this really means is often misunderstood. It doesn't mean ignoring the past and future. You obviously need to plan for the future and learn from the past. It means something more subtle. It means recognizing that the only place you truly exist is in this present moment, and that past and future exist for you only as thoughts and feelings arising in this present. When you worry about the future, you're not actually experiencing the future. You're experiencing a feeling of worry now, in the present. When you ruminate about the past, you're not actually revisiting the past. You're experiencing a feeling of regret or nostalgia or whatever it is, now, in the present. All experiences, even those about past and future, happen in the present. The present is the only location of actual experience. And if you start paying attention to this, really paying attention, not just intellectually agreeing, you notice something profound. You notice that there's never really a problem in the actual present. Problems exist in the past, memories of things that went wrong, or in the future, anticipating things that might go wrong. But in the actual present, in this exact moment, you're okay. You're breathing. Your body is functioning. You're here, alive, existing. There's nothing wrong with this moment itself, separate from the stories you tell about it or the worries you bring to it about other moments. This isn't denying that real problems exist. It's recognizing that problems exist in the domain of narrative time, the story about past and future, not in the timeless present. And when you rest in the timeless present, you can actually deal with problems in the narrative domain more effectively because you're not carrying the emotional burden of treating them as threats to your fundamental being. You can see them for what they are, practical challenges to be navigated, not existential crises. The physics without time, strangely, validates this approach. If the universe is fundamentally timeless, if all moments exist equally in the block universe, then the obsession with getting to a particular future or escaping from a particular past is based on a misunderstanding. You're not really going anywhere. You're not moving through time. You're existing as a particular pattern in space-time, and different slices of that pattern contain different experiences and memories. But from the perspective outside time, you're the entire pattern, complete and whole, existing all at once. Think of it this way. Imagine your entire life as a four-dimensional painting in space-time. One dimension is time, three are space. That painting represents your whole life, from birth to death, existing all at once as a single, complete object. From inside the painting, experiencing it slice by slice, you feel the flow of time. But from outside, the complete painting simply exists. Nothing is flowing. It's all there. Now, would it make sense for an early slice of the painting to worry about later slices? Not really. The later slices are already there, painted, existing. They're as determined and complete as the early slices. Similarly, would it make sense for a later slice to regret earlier slices? Again, not really. The earlier slices exist equally, eternally present in the complete picture. Of course, from the internal perspective, from the perspective of consciousness, experiencing slice by slice, planning and remembering are absolutely necessary and useful. You need memories of earlier slices to navigate later slices. You need to anticipate future slices to make sensible choices in present slices. The temporal construction, the illusory flow of time, is adaptive. It's useful. It was selected by evolution precisely because creatures that experience time as flowing can plan and adapt better. But you can do all that planning and adapting without getting lost in the temporal narrative. You can keep a part of yourself anchored in the timeless present, knowing that all worries about past and future are ultimately stories about a structure that already exists, complete and whole. This creates a kind of paradoxical peace. You can be fully engaged in navigating life, making plans, learning from the past, but without the underlying sense of existential urgency that comes from believing time is truly flowing and you're truly being dragged along by it. There's also something to be said about impermanence. One of the main sources of suffering philosophers have observed for millennia is attachment to things that change. You want the pleasant moment to continue, but it fades. You want to avoid the painful moment, but it arises anyway. And underlying all that attachment and aversion is the belief that time is taking things away from you, that you're losing moments as they disappear into the past. But if time isn't real, if all moments exist eternally in the block universe, then nothing is really lost. The happy moment you had yesterday still exists. It will always exist, eternally present at its location in space-time. You just aren't experiencing that slice now. You're experiencing this slice, but from the timeless perspective, both moments simply exist. Nothing is gone. Nothing is lost. It's all eternally present. This might sound abstract, but it can have real emotional effect, because when you grieve the past, what are you really grieving? You're grieving that something no longer exists. But if all moments exist eternally, then nothing really ceases to exist. It just changes which moment you're experiencing. The grief of loss is based on a particular conception of time that might not be correct. This doesn't mean you can't feel sadness when someone dies or when a phase of life ends. It means you can hold that sadness differently. You can recognize it as a change in which part of the block universe you're experiencing, not as an annihilation of something that was. The person who died, the versions of them at all moments when they were alive, still exist in the block universe. You just aren't interacting with new temporal slices of them anymore. But all the past slices exist eternally. And as you're lying here now, on the edge of sleep, you can feel this. You can let go of the feeling that time is taking this moment away from you. This moment, this now, will exist forever at its location in space-time. When you wake up tomorrow and this moment is a memory, it will still exist, as real as anything. You'll just be experiencing a different slice of your pattern in space-time. But your complete existence, the whole pattern in 4 dimensions, remains whole, complete, timeless. There's no rush, there's no loss. There's just the vast eternal present of the cosmos, and you, a perspective within it, experiencing different slices in sequence. But all the slices are there, always have been, always will be. You're whole, complete. Nothing is missing, there's nothing to fear. You can simply be here now, in the only moment that exists, because all moments exist equally in the eternal now of the timeless universe. And so we arrive at the end of this journey. Though end might be the wrong word if time isn't really real. Maybe it's better to say we've arrived at this particular slice of our shared exploration, this particular location in space-time where your consciousness and these words meet. And what a beautiful location it is, with you comfortable, relaxed, maybe already half asleep, your mind quiet after contemplating some of the biggest mysteries physics and philosophy have ever encountered. If you take anything from this nighttime conversation, let it be this: the sense of urgency you carry about time, the feeling that it's always running out, always slipping through your fingers, always taking things away from you. That feeling is based on a particular conception of how reality works, and that conception might be wrong. Not in a way that would make your experience invalid, but in a way that could loosen the grip of temporal anxiety on you. Because if physicists are right, if time is just an emergent perspective and not a fundamental feature of reality, then everything you're worried about losing, everything you're rushing to reach, already exists in the vast, timeless present of the universe. The past isn't gone, it's still there at its eternal location. The future isn't waiting, it's already there, equally present. And you're not being dragged through time like a piece of driftwood floating downstream. You're complete, a 4-dimensional pattern in space-time, and what you experience as flow is just your consciousness illuminating different parts of that pattern in sequence. There's an image I find helpful. Imagine a book sitting on a shelf. All the pages of the book exist simultaneously. The first page, the last page, all the pages in between. They're all there at the same time. When you read the book, you experience one page at a time in sequence, and for you as the reader, there's a progression, a story unfolding, a sense of movement from beginning to end. But the book itself isn't unfolding or progressing. It's complete, all pages existing at once. Maybe your life is like that. Maybe consciousness is like reading the book. You experience page by page, moment by moment. And for you, there's a story, a flow, a sense of time passing. But the complete book of your life, all the pages, all the moments, already exists whole and entire in the timeless library of the cosmos. You're reading, not writing, experiencing, not creating. And maybe that's comforting rather than limiting, because it means you don't have to carry the burden of making everything turn out right. The story is already there. You just have to live it, experience it, one page at a time. And now, as you sink deeper into sleep, you can let all this complexity dissolve. You don't need to understand everything. You don't need to solve the mysteries of time and reality. Physicists have been working on this for decades and still don't have definitive answers. You can simply let the questions hover, let the possibilities dance at the edge of your consciousness as sleep takes you. Because in the end, or maybe better to say, at this particular location of experience, what matters isn't whether time is fundamentally real or emergent or illusory. What matters is how you experience this moment, here, now. And you can experience it with peace. You can experience it knowing there are deep and beautiful mysteries at the heart of reality, that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than common sense suggests, and that you, small conscious perspective that you are, have the extraordinary privilege of asking questions about it all. You're part of a cosmos that became complex enough to wonder about itself. You're the universe looking at itself, questioning its own nature. And whether time is real or illusory, emergent or fundamental, doesn't change the miracle of that fact. Doesn't change the value of your experience, the beauty of your consciousness, the significance of your presence here now, in this eternal moment that might be the only moment that truly exists. So take a deep breath. Let your body relax completely. Feel the weight of your head on the pillow, the softness of the blankets, the quietness of the space around you, and know that you're exactly where you need to be, in the only place you've ever been and ever will be, in the eternal, timeless present where all existence rests. There's no past chasing you, no future to reach. There's only this, only now, only being. And that's enough, more than enough. It's everything. Sleep well. Rest in the eternal present. And when you wake, maybe you'll carry with you a trace of this timeless peace, a whisper of the possibility that the time you feel so intensely might be just one of the wonderful ways the universe experiences itself. And you, experiencing it now, are part of that grand and mysterious dance of existence. Good night. Or perhaps more accurately, good eternal present. May your rest be deep and your dreams, if you have them, be as timeless and vast as the cosmos in which you, I, and everything else exist together, now and always.